The restaurant was full that night, louder than usual, and every table was taken. People were talking, laughing, arguing, and clattering their plates. Waiters rushed from one side to another, trying not to bump into anyone in the middle of this rush. A new waitress named Lena stood quietly near the counter. She was small, thin, and calm, and she kept her eyes down as she carried a tray of glasses. She was still learning the menu and the rules of the place. But one rule was louder than everything else. Don't touch that piano. There was an old piano in the corner of the restaurant, covered in dust. The owner, Mr. Harris, had warned all staff many times that no one should touch it. No one knew the full story, but everyone respected the rule. Some said the piano was broken, some said it belonged to someone important, and some believed it was kept there for memories only. But whatever the truth was, no one dared to go near it. Whenever someone even stood close, Mr. Harris would shout from across the room, "Don't touch that piano," and the whole staff would jump. Lena did not understand why the rule felt so heavy. But every time she passed by the piano, something inside her stirred. It was like a quiet voice deep in her heart whispered to her, reminding her of something she had buried long ago. Her fingers would twitch slightly, as if they wanted to play. But she forced herself to look away. She was here to work, not to create problems that night. A man named Brian came into the restaurant with a loud voice and a proud attitude. He sat in the middle table and instantly started complaining about everything. First the water was too cold, then the bread was too warm, and then the chair was too soft. The other customers shifted uncomfortably, but Brian didn't care. He liked attention, and he liked making people feel small. When Lena approached his table to take his order, Brian stared at her for a long time. He smirked and asked in a loud voice, "Are you new here, girl?" She nodded politely, keeping her eyes down. Brian laughed and said, "You look too weak for this job. I hope you don't break anything." Some customers gave him disapproving looks, but he didn't stop. Instead, he waved his hand dismissively and told her to hurry up with his food. Lena stayed quiet, even though her hands shook a little. She had learned to ignore people like him, but tonight felt different. As she walked away, Brian kept staring at her. His eyes kept drifting toward the old piano, and a strange idea began forming in his mind. He could see Lena's discomfort, and he enjoyed it. The more she avoided the piano, the more curious he became. Why was she acting like that? Why did the owner shout every time someone got close? Brian loved drama, and he loved breaking rules even more. Later, when Lena went to serve another table near the piano, Brian suddenly stood up and shouted across the restaurant, "Hey, new girl, don't you dare touch that piano." His words echoed through the entire room. Everyone froze. Even the cooks peeked out from the kitchen. Mr. Harris hurried out from behind the counter and yelled, "Nobody touches it. That's the rule." Lena stood confused. She had not done anything. She had not even looked at the piano that time. But Brian kept pushing. "Come on, girl. What's so special about that old thing? Afraid it will explode?" The customers murmured in irritation. They didn't like the way he was treating her, but they also didn't want trouble. Brian walked toward the piano slowly, tapping on the wooden frame with his fingers just to provoke the owner. Lena's heart dropped when she saw him approach it. She didn't know why, but her chest felt tight, sweat formed on her palms. The old piano looked like it was waiting for something. Brian loudly said, "Let's see what happens if someone actually touches it." Then he looked straight at Lena. His eyes narrowed and he smiled in a cruel way. "Or maybe you should be the one to touch it." The room became so silent that even the ticking clock felt loud. Lena felt everyone's eyes turn toward her. She didn't understand why she suddenly became part of this. She had done nothing wrong. But the pressure around her grew heavier and heavier. Mr. Harris stepped forward again, his face pale. He said, in a voice that trembled slightly, "No one touches it. Do you hear me?" No one. It was the first time the customers had ever heard fear in his voice. Then, strangely, Brian laughed. He enjoyed the tension. He enjoyed watching Lena's face turn nervous. And as the crowd watched, something began to shift inside. Lena, the piano in the corner, silent for years, now felt like it was calling her, not loudly, not clearly, but softly, with a familiar warmth she didn't want to remember. The air felt heavier, the light seemed dimmer, and Lena felt like she was standing between her old life and a moment she could not escape. Something big was about to happen, and everyone in the room felt it, even if they didn't understand why. The night was no longer ordinary. This was the night the warning truly echoed, and the night everything quietly began to change. The restaurant stayed silent even after Brian sat back down. His loud challenge still echoed in every corner, and the tension refused to leave the room. Lena tried to hide behind the counter, but her heart kept racing. She could feel the weights of everyone's eyes, some filled with sympathy, some curious, and some frightened. She took a deep breath and tried to steady her shaking hands, but her mind kept replaying Brian's words again and again. She wished the night would end, but trouble always grows bigger before going quiet. Brian leaned back in his chair and smirked like a man who believed he controlled the whole room. Every few seconds he glanced toward the piano and then toward Lena, as if he was planning something worse. Lena avoided looking at him, but she could feel his presence like smoke in the air. Mr. Harris walked toward her, his steps heavy. He looked worried, not angry. His voice was low when he spoke. "Stay away from him. He wants attention." Lena nodded, but she could not stop the cold feeling. Inside her chest, she whispered, "Why does the piano matter so much, sir?" Mr. Harris froze for a moment. His eyes softened with old sadness. He opened his mouth like he wanted to explain the truth, but then he shook his head and walked away instead. "Just don't go near it," he repeated before disappearing into the kitchen. The mystery around the piano only made Lena more uneasy. Why did her heart feel connected to it? Why did touching that piano feel both dangerous and familiar at the same time? The customers whispered among themselves. Some said the piano was cursed. Some said it belonged to a famous musician who died. And others believed it was locked to protect a forgotten memory. Lena didn't know what to believe. She only knew. Her fingers felt strange whenever she passed it, like they remembered a life she had tried to forget. Brian watched all this with growing excitement. His eyes gleamed with mischief. He loved the idea of breaking rules, and even more, he loved to tear down quiet people like Lena. He enjoyed seeing fear in her eyes. He believed ruining her evening would make his meal taste better. A young woman sitting with her family finally grew tired of his behavior. She stood up and said gently, "Please stop bothering her. You're ruining the night for everyone." But Brian scoffed and waved her off. "I'm not doing anything," he said loudly. "I'm just trying to make this place fun." His voice dripped with arrogance, and the woman sat down angrily. But something unexpected happened next. A small child, no older than 6, walked up to Lena and handed her a folded paper napkin. Lena opened it slowly. Inside was a little drawing of a stick figure girl playing a piano. The child whispered softly, "You look like someone who could play." Lena's heart tightened. She blinked quickly to stop her tears. She didn't know why that simple drawing felt like someone had opened a locked door inside her before she could thank the child. The mother came and gently pulled her back to their table. Brian noticed the moment and shouted, "Oh, look! Even a kid thinks you can play." His voice echoed again, and people groaned. The peaceful moment broke instantly, but Lena didn't react this time. Instead, she stared at the drawing in her hand. The lines were simple, but they pulled her memory backward, back to the times where she sat beside her father, learning music note by note. She had stayed away from pianos for years. Ever since he passed away, she had promised herself she would never touch one again. The pain was too deep. Memories too heavy. She thought she had buried that life, yet here she was, standing inches away from the one thing she swore she would avoid forever. Brian banged his hand on the table and said, "Come on, just one note." He pointed toward the piano with a mocking grin. The customers looked angry now, but no one dared to confront him directly. He thrived on their silence. Lena stepped back slowly, her pulse racing. She felt trapped between her past and this strange moment. She didn't want to be bullied, but she also didn't want to break the rule or disrespect the owner. She whispered to herself, "Why is this happening tonight?" But then another strange thing happened. The lights flickered slightly above the piano, only for a second, but enough for everyone to notice. Some customers gasped, others murmured nervously. Even Brian stopped laughing for a moment. Lena felt the air shift, like the room had inhaled deeply and was waiting for something impossible. Her fingertips tingled again, the same way they used to before she played her father's favorite song. She swallowed hard, confused and scared by the strange pull she felt toward the piano. Brian laughed again, trying to act brave. "See? Even the lights are scared," he joked loudly. But beneath his laugh, something uncertain flickered in his eyes. He could feel the tension too, though he pretended not to. Lena took another step backward, but her heel hit a chair leg and she stumbled. Her hand instinctively reached out to steady herself on the nearest object. And fate, or something else, guided her hand toward the piano's side frame. Her fingers did not touch the keys, but they brushed the old wood gently. A soft vibration traveled through her hand, surprising her. It was like the piano recognized her touch, like it had been waiting for her for a very long time. Everyone froze, including Brian, and in that frozen moment, the night took a new turn, one that none of them were ready for. Lena stood with her hand resting lightly on the side of the old piano. Her touch was soft, but the reaction inside her was powerful. It felt as if a sleeping memory woke up, stretching after years of silence. She pulled her hand back quickly, almost afraid of what she felt. Her heart pounded against her ribs, and her breath grew uneven. She whispered to herself, "Why does this feel so familiar?" The customers watched silently, confused and captivated. None of them understood what they had just witnessed. A simple wooden piano should not create such a deep reaction, but something in the room had shifted. It felt heavier, quieter, almost sacred. Even Brian, who usually had a quick joke ready, stayed silent for a moment. Lena stepped back, but the piano seemed to pull at her again, like an invisible thread tying her to it. She pressed a hand against her chest, trying to calm herself. She did not want this. She did not want the memories to rise again. She had tried for years to bury them, but now they were rising like waves she could not stop. Her father's voice appeared in her mind, soft and warm. "Music is not just sound, Lena. It is breath. It is heart. It is truth." She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to push the memory away, but it was too late. The past was breaking through the wall she had built around it. Her father had been a pianist, not famous but deeply passionate. He played in small halls, small restaurants, small gatherings, anywhere people needed music. Lena had been his shadow, sitting beside him on the piano bench, tiny fingers learning to follow his larger ones. He would smile at her and say, "One day, you will play better than me," but that day never came. He passed away suddenly when she was only 14, leaving her with grief so heavy it felt like chains. On the day of his funeral, she promised herself she would never touch another piano. She believed music would hurt her more than heal her. So she turned away from it, walked away from it, buried it deep inside her heart. Now here it was again, rising like sunlight after years of darkness. Lena opened her eyes and found the drawing from the little child still in her hand. A simple girl drawn beside a piano. It felt like a message from a life she thought she lost. Her eyes grew warm with tears she tried to hide. Brian suddenly broke the silence with a sarcastic clap. "What's wrong? Did the piano shock you?" he said with a grin. The customers rolled their eyes at him. Some whispered angrily under their breath, but no one interrupted. They were too focused on Lena, on the strange energy forming around her. Lena took a deep breath and walked a step away from the piano. She needed to escape, to get some air, to clear her mind. She headed toward the kitchen, hoping no one would stop her. but as she passed the tables, quiet words floated after her. She looks like she's remembering something. Maybe she really can play. Did you see how she reacted? These voices pierced her heart. She didn't want people to expect anything from her. She didn't want to disappoint them or herself. She wished she could hide, but fate had other plans. Behind her, Brian stood up again, restless and annoyed that the attention had shifted away from him. "I'm not done," he shouted. "If she touched it once, she can touch it again." His voice echoed through the restaurant like a sharp crack in the air. Lena froze mid-step. She didn't want to face him again. But she also didn't want to make a scene. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting his. Brian smirked, ready to provoke her again, but something unexpected happened. For the first time that night, Lena did not look afraid. She looked tired, not weak, not nervous, just tired of running from a piece of herself she had abandoned long ago. She walked back toward her station, trying to avoid the piano entirely. But her path led her close to it again, and that invisible thread pulled at her once more, urging her to turn her head, urging her to remember who she once was. She stood a few feet away from the piano, staring silently at the keys. They were dusty, yellowed with age, and yet they seemed full of life, like they were waiting, expecting something. The customers watched with a mix of curiosity and hope. Brian watched with impatience and frustration. Mr. Harris watched with fear and confusion, and Lena watched with a heart full of conflict. Her fingers tingled again, more strongly this time, almost buzzing. It felt like if she touched a key now, the world around her would change instantly. Her breathing became shallow. She whispered so quietly only she could hear it. "I shouldn't. I can't." I promised him. But deep inside, another voice rose, her father's voice, gentle and encouraging. "Music will not hurt you, my girl. It will find you when you need it most." Then she noticed something subtle. The piano bench had been slightly pulled out, not much, just an inch, but enough to look inviting, almost welcoming. Had it been like that before? She didn't remember. The customers leaned forward subconsciously, as if the entire room shared the same heartbeat. Lena reached out her hand, slowly, hesitantly, like someone reaching toward a flame. Her fingers hovered over the keys, trembling. Everyone held their breath, even Brian, even the children, even the cooks watching from the kitchen window. Then, just as her fingertip was about to touch the first key, a loud crash interrupted everything. A tray fell, a glass shattered, and everyone jumped. Lena jerked her hand back in shock. The moment broke, but the spell did not fade. Because now everyone knew one thing clearly. Lena was someone connected to that piano in a way none of them could understand yet. And the night was far from over. The real story was only beginning. The loud crash of the tray shook the whole restaurant. Glass pieces scattered across the floor. And for a moment, everyone forgot about the piano. The cooks rushed out, waiters hurried to clean the mess, and customers leaned back in their chairs, startled by the sudden noise. But even with all the movement and noise, Lena felt only one thing, the echo of the moment she almost touched the piano key. It lingered in her heart like an unfinished breath. She backed away slowly, her pulse still racing. The piano stood behind her, silent and patient, like it knew she would return. She didn't want to look at it again, but she could feel its presence like a warm light on her back. Lena whispered under her breath, "Not tonight. Please not tonight." Mr. Harris came rushing to her, worry filling his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, and Lena nodded weakly. He then glanced at the piano. His jaw tightening, he whispered, "Don't let that man push you. Keep away from the piano. It's not just an instrument." His voice shook slightly, full of something deeper than fear, something closer to pain. Lena wanted to ask him why again, but the words stuck in her throat. She didn't want to stir more emotions, not when her own heart was already too heavy. Mr. Harris sighed and walked away. But he kept glancing at her as if he knew something was coming, something neither of them could stop. Brian, of course, couldn't stay quiet for long. He leaned back in his chair and clapped slowly with a mocking grin. "Wow! What a dramatic night!" He shouted, all this over a useless old piano. His laugh echoed across the room. Sharp and annoying, some customers glared at him. But he didn't care. He loved being the center of attention, even if it made everyone else miserable. The little child who had drawn the picture earlier peeked over the table again, watching Lena with wide, innocent eyes. Lena forced a small smile, trying to look strong. But inside she felt like she was about to crumble. Suddenly, one of the customers walked up to her. A woman in her mid-50s with warm, understanding eyes. She whispered, "You don't have to be scared of him." Lena blinked in surprise. The woman continued, "Some people shout because they are empty inside. Don't let them decide who you are." Those words settled gently into Lena's heart. Her fingers relaxed slightly, her breath steadied. She whispered, "Thank you," and the woman gave her a small nod before returning to her table. But Brian saw this and grew irritated. He wasn't used to being ignored. He banged his fork against his plate 3 times. "Hey, I'm still waiting for someone to touch that piano," he shouted, loud enough for everyone to hear. People groaned in frustration. Some customers whispered angrily, "Why won't he stop?" Lena flinched at the noise, but she did not run this time. Instead, she faced him slowly, not with anger but with exhaustion. She said quietly, "Why does it matter to you?" Brian froze, surprised that she spoke up. "Because," he said, leaning forward, "you are hiding something. And I hate secrets." Lena's heart tightened. He was right in one way. She was hiding something. Something she thought she had buried forever. But she stayed silent, unwilling to reveal anything. Not to him, not in front of strangers. Brian smirked, convinced he had pushed her into a corner. "Look how your hand shook when you almost touched it," he said. "What are you? That you might actually be good at something?" The words struck her like a blow, not because they were cruel, but because they touched a truth she never admitted. Lena stepped backward, one slow step at a time. The piano came into view again, standing tall and silent. The light above it flickered once more. Just like before, only this time, the flicker felt intentional. Like the room itself was reacting to her emotions. People whispered nervously, "Did you see that? The lights again. This is strange." Lena could feel her father's memory growing stronger. It was as if the past sat right beside her, whispering softly, reminding her of the girl she used to be. The girl who loved music more than anything. The girl who believed her future was bright. The girl who believed she could touch hearts with her music. She stared at the piano keys, imagining her father's hands guiding hers. She could almost hear him say, "The world needs your music, Lena." Her eyes grew wet, but she blinked the tears away. She wasn't ready to face that truth, not yet. But something inside her shifted, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. Then something unexpected happened. The piano made a sound on its own, a tiny, soft click, like a key settling back in place. Everyone gasped, some stepping back in shock. Lena's breath caught in her throat. Was it the lights? The temperature? The old wood adjusting? Or something else entirely? Whatever it was, it pushed the night deeper into mystery. The customers watched Lena with wide eyes. Brian looked confused for the first time. Mr. Harris looked terrified, and Lena stood frozen, her hand trembling again. The piano wasn't just waiting anymore, it was calling her. And she knew she couldn't run from it much longer. The piano's soft click left the whole restaurant in a strange stillness. People looked around as if expecting someone to explain what had just happened. But no one spoke. Even the lights above the piano stopped flickering, settling into a steady glow that made the old wood look strangely alive. Lena felt the hair on her arms rise. It was not fear this time. It was something deeper, something she couldn't name. She wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold her shaking heart in place. Brian stared at the piano with narrowed eyes, trying to pretend he wasn't startled. "Old junk," he muttered loudly. But his voice didn't carry the confidence it had before. He kept glancing at the piano like it might move again. Lena walked toward a table to pick up empty plates, hoping to keep herself busy, but everywhere she went, customers whispered about the piano, about her reaction, about the strange energy that filled the room. A group of teenagers near the window kept looking from her to the piano, their eyes bright with curiosity. An elderly man whispered to his wife. "I haven't seen anything like this in years." Lena felt trapped. She wanted to run home, lock the door, and forget this night. But her shift wasn't over, and more than that. Something in the room kept pulling her back toward the piano over and over again. She felt like she was walking in circles around her own destiny. She didn't want destiny. She didn't want attention. She didn't want music, not anymore. But the piano was calling her louder than ever. A small voice broke through the noise in her mind. The same little girl who had drawn the picture earlier approached again. She tugged gently at Lena's sleeve. "Miss, my mom says you looked like you were about to cry," she said softly. "Are you okay?" Lena knelt down, forcing a smile. "I'm all right," she whispered, though her voice trembled. The girl nodded, handed her another folded napkin. This time it wasn't a drawing, it was a message written in big, uneven letters. "Follow your heart." Lena's breath caught. She looked up, but the mother only smiled from her table. She didn't say anything, she didn't need to. Something inside Lena softened, almost broke. She tucked the napkin in her apron and whispered, "Thank you." Suddenly, Brian slammed his fist on his table again. "Enough with the drama," he shouted. "If that piano actually makes noises, then someone needs to test it properly." He pointed straight at Lena. "And she's the one who should do it." People groaned in anger this time. A man stood up and confronted Brian. "Leave her alone." "She doesn't owe you anything," he said firmly. Brian laughed bitterly and stood up too. "Oh please, she's clearly acting," he said. "You all think she's special because of a stupid sound?" Lena backed away, her hands trembling. She didn't want to be pushed anymore. She wanted peace. But peace was not going to come tonight. Mr. Harris walked forward quickly. "Brian, sit down before I throw you out," he said sharply. It was the first time he had spoken with such force. Brian glared at him, but the owner didn't back down then. The strangest thing of the night happened. Every forked glass and small decoration on the tables closest to the piano vibrated gently, just for a second, like a ripple of energy passing through the room. Customers gasped, pulling their hands away from the table. People turned toward the piano, eyes wide. The silence grew heavy again. Lena's heart thudded so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Mr. Harris looked pale, his lips trembling as he whispered, "No. It can't be happening again." Lena heard him, and the word "again" struck her like lightning again. Something like this had happened before. Before she could ask, the lights above the piano brightened slightly, almost like a spotlight turning on. The keys seemed to shine through the dust. The whole instrument looked awakened, alert, watching Lena, her breath caught in her throat. Her father's voice echoed in her mind again. Clearer this time. "Music will always find you." "Lena." Brian tried to laugh but failed. He pointed at the piano with shaking fingers. That's nothing. Some kind of electrical thing," he stuttered, his arrogance cracked. Slipping away completely, Lena stood frozen. She didn't want to touch it, but she also couldn't ignore it anymore. The piano wasn't haunted, it wasn't broken, it wasn't cursed. It was waiting for her, and everyone in the room knew it, even if they didn't understand how. The old man who had been silent all night finally spoke, his voice gentle. Child. Sometimes things call to us because they belong to us. Lena's knees felt weak. She wasn't ready to accept that. Not yet, not in front of strangers. But she couldn't deny what she felt either. She turned slowly toward the piano again. The wooden frame seemed to glow. The bench looked like it had pulled out even more, inviting her, begging her. She shook her head, whispering, "Why me? Why now?" But deep down she already knew the answer. Because she had run from music for too long. Because something inside her had always been waiting to be awakened. Because the piano wasn't calling just any person. It was calling its rightful player. And Lena realized with a shiver that she might be the only one who could bring it back to life. Lena felt the weight of every eye in the restaurant as she stood facing the piano again. The room felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in. But it wasn't fear that made her chest tight. It was the feeling of something important drawing closer, something she could no longer push away. Brian tried to laugh again, trying to recover his lost confidence. But his voice cracked. "This is stupid," he said. "It's just a piece of wood." But even he didn't believe his own words anymore. He stepped back from the piano slightly, as if afraid it might react again. The customers watched in a tense silence. Their earlier frustration had turned into curiosity. Then wonder, now something close to reverence. One woman whispered, "Maybe this is fate." Another said softly, "Something is happening here." Lena tried to walk away again. But her feet didn't move. Something inside her, something old, something buried, told her she couldn't leave. It felt like her father's hand was gently resting on her shoulder. Guiding her, she whispered to herself, "I'm not ready." But the piano disagreed. A single key, a middle one, pressed itself down a hair's width. Not enough to make a sound, but enough for everyone to notice. A soft gasp spread through the room. Lena trembled, her breath shaky. She had seen strange things before. Grief made her see shadows of memory, echoes of her father. But this felt real. Too real. Mr. Harris stepped forward, his voice breaking. "I knew this day would come," he whispered. Not to anyone in particular. His eyes were misty, full of old memories and fear. Lena turned toward him. "What is this place? What is this piano?" she asked, her voice trembling. He swallowed hard and looked at her with sad eyes. "It belonged to someone who played with their whole soul," he said. "Someone who made people cry without saying a word." His throat tightened. "Your mother." The breath left Lena's lungs all at once. Her legs nearly gave out. She had suspected a connection, a feeling. But hearing it out loud shattered her. She grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, her eyes widening in shock. My mother?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Mr. Harris nodded slowly. "She played here every Friday night. People came from miles away to listen. She was a light in this place." He paused. "And when she passed, I closed the piano forever. I couldn't let anyone replace her." Lena's heart cracked open. She remembered sitting on her mother's lap, tiny fingers on the keys. She remembered her mother humming as she cooked, her father laughing softly. She remembered music filling their small home like sunshine. She remembered her mother's hands, gentle, warm, magical. She also remembered the day music ended, the day everything turned quiet. The day she stopped touching pianos because touching them felt like saying goodbye all over again. Her eyes filled with tears, not just sadness, longing. She hadn't been running from pianos. She had been running from her own heart. Brian suddenly shouted, trying to regain control. "So what? She thinks she's special because she has a sad story?" His voice was shaky now, desperate. He could feel the room slipping away from him. A man near him whispered, "Shut up," and people nodded. For once, Brian had no power here. Lena wiped her tears and looked at her reflection on the piano's glossy surface. Her mother had sat on that bench. Her father had stood beside her. And now it felt like they were both watching her. Waiting, hoping, she stepped closer, her fingers shaking. The air around the piano felt warm, almost comforting. Her mother's memory wrapped around her like a soft hug. She whispered, "I don't know if I can do this." The piano answered with another soft click. This time 2 keys lowered 0.5 millimeter, a gentle nudge, a whisper from the past. The little girl's voice came from behind her, soft and innocent. "Miss, maybe it wants you." Lena turned her head, and the child smiled shyly. "My mom says some things belong to our hearts, even if we run." Lena felt her knees weaken. She turned back to the piano. The bench was now pulled fully out, as if offering her a seat, inviting her, welcoming her. Brian backed away further, muttering, "This is crazy." But no one listened to him. The entire restaurant held its breath. Waiting, Lena reached out her hand again. Her fingers hovered above the keys. Her heart beat so loudly, it felt like a drum inside her chest. She whispered to herself, "Mom, Dad, I'm scared." But another whisper rose inside her, a familiar voice, warm as sunlight. "Music will heal you, my girl." Tears streamed down her face as she placed her fingertips gently on the keys. The piano shivered beneath her touch. Alive, almost breathing, and Lena felt for the first time in years the beginning of who she truly was returning to her. The room leaned forward as one. Brian's face went pale. Mr. Harris pressed a hand over his mouth. The little girl clasped her hands in excitement. And then, Lena pressed the first key. A single note rang out, soft, perfect, full of emotion. A sound that carried the soul of her mother, the teachings of her father, and the healing her own heart had been waiting for. The sound filled the restaurant, and everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again. The single note Lena played hung in the air like a glowing thread. It vibrated through the wooden floor, through the glass windows, through the hearts of everyone watching. The whole restaurant stayed silent. So silent it felt unreal. Even Brian, who always had a comment ready, stood frozen like a statue. His mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out. Lena lifted her hand slowly, her fingers trembling like she had touched something sacred. She took a shaky breath, her chest rising and falling as if she had run miles. She whispered, "Mama," but only the piano heard her soft cry. She stared at the keys, afraid and amazed at the same time. Mr. Harris stepped forward, tears shining in his eyes. His voice broke as he whispered, "You sound just like her." The customers turned toward him with shock. Some whispered, "Her mother?" They waited for him to continue, but he couldn't speak for a moment. The memories in his heart were too heavy. Finally, he wiped his face and said, "Your mother. She didn't just play music, child. She healed people with it." His voice trembled. "I saw people walk in here broken and walk out with hope just because she touched a piano key." He pointed at the piano. "She brought this place to life, and when she died, it died with her." Lena closed her eyes as tears fell. It hurt to hear his words, but it also warmed her heart. Her mother had been more than she remembered, more than she ever knew. The piano felt warm under her hand, like it was alive, like it remembered her mother too. It felt like it was greeting her. It felt like home. Brian suddenly found his voice again and shouted, "This is all a show." But his voice shook so badly that no one believed him. The customers glared at him, some whispering angrily. A man at a nearby table stood up and said firmly, "Show some respect." But even that did not matter anymore. The attention belonged fully to Lena now. Not because she wanted it, but because the piano wanted her. The little girl from earlier climbed off her chair and walked toward Lena without fear. She tugged Lena's apron and whispered, "Please play more." Lena knelt slowly, brushing the child's hair gently. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. The child smiled with pure innocence. "My mom says when people are scared, it means they're about to do something brave." Those words struck Lena in the heart. Her mother had said something similar once, her father too. They had always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. Lena stood up again, her knees shaking. She placed both hands on the piano keys. Not pressing them yet, just resting on them. The piano hummed faintly under her touch. Like it recognized her and welcomed her back, the room leaned forward as one heartbeat. Brian shouted again out of desperation, "Stop ignoring me!" But the sound of his voice didn't fit the moment. It felt out of place, ugly, small. A woman near him snapped, "Enough." Another added, "You've done enough damage tonight." The room pushed him out emotionally. He no longer controlled anything here. Lena did. The piano did. Mr. Harris walked closer and spoke softly. "Your mother sat exactly where you're standing. She used to say this piano had a soul," he sighed. Maybe she was right. Lena lowered her head, letting his words sink in. Her heart felt heavy and light at the same time, heavy with grief. "Light with rediscovered love," she whispered. "I stopped playing after she died. She didn't expect anyone to hear." But the whole room did. A wave of sympathy moved through the crowd. The elderly man from earlier stood up and said gently, "Sometimes music is the only way to speak with those we've lost, child." His wife nodded beside him. "Your mother might be waiting to hear you." Lena covered her mouth as a small sob escaped. The thought broke her heart and healed it in the same moment. She felt her mother's memory moving through her like a warm breeze. Guiding her hand, she whispered, "I miss you." So much. The piano keys glowed under the warm light. They looked like tiny steps leading her back to a part of her soul she abandoned long ago. She lifted her hands and gently pressed a second key. A soft, tender note filled the air, then a third, then a fourth. A fragile melody began to form, shaky at first. Like a memory trying to speak again after years of silence. The customers leaned closer, tears forming in their eyes. Some held hands, some covered their mouths. Some simply listened with trembling hearts. Lena closed her eyes and kept playing, and with each note, she felt her mother's presence stronger, not as a ghost, not as a memory, but as love pure and warm, a love that had never left her. Her fingers moved more confidently. The melody became richer, deeper, filled with heartbreak and hope woven together. It was not her mother's song, it was her own. A song of pain, of healing, of coming home. Brian tried to interrupt again, but his voice was drowned out by the music. No one looked at him, no one cared, not anymore. Mr. Harris covered his face with his hands, crying openly. The little girl hugged her mother tightly. The elderly couple held onto each other. The entire restaurant felt wrapped in magic, and Lena felt alive again. As if the music had stitched her broken pieces together. One note at a time, when she finally opened her eyes. Her hands trembling, her heart full. She realized something important. She had not just played for the restaurant. She had played for her mother, and her mother had listened. The room filled with applause, cheers, and tears. But all Lena could do was place a hand over her heart and whisper silently, "Thank you, Mama." The applause rose like a wave, warm and full of life. It washed over Lena, surrounding her in a way she had never felt before. She stood there, frozen, her fingers still resting lightly on the piano keys. Her heart thumped like it was trying to speak through her chest. Tears blurred her vision, but for once, they were not tears of pain. They were tears of release. The customers stood one by one, clapping louder, cheering. Some wiping their eyes, some whispered, "She brought the music back," others said. Her mother would be proud. The room was no longer just a restaurant. It felt like a place where something sacred had happened. Something unforgettable. Lena stepped back from the piano slowly. Like she was waking from a dream, she looked at her hands. Surprised by how steady they were now. Surprised that the fear that had followed her for years was gone. She touched her heart gently, feeling a strange warmth inside. A warmth she hadn't felt since she was a child sitting beside her mother, Mr. Harris came toward her with shaky steps. His eyes were red and swollen. He placed both hands on her shoulders, his voice trembling as he said, "Your mother. She would have smiled tonight." Lena bit her lip, struggling not to cry again. She whispered, "Did she really play here every week?" He nodded. "Every Friday without fail, rain or storm. She sat right where you stood." He looked at the piano lovingly. "She gave this place a soul." His voice cracked. "And so did you tonight." Lena lowered her eyes, her voice soft. "I didn't think I could ever play again." Mr. Harris shook his head gently. "Child, some gifts never leave us. They stay quiet until we are ready to return to them." As he spoke, something unexpected happened, Brian. The man who had mocked her all night slowly walked forward. His shoulders drooped, his face pale. His pride completely gone, he cleared his throat. Unable to look her in the eyes, he muttered, I'm sorry." The words fell awkwardly. But they were real. The customers stared in shock. No one had expected him to apologize, not tonight, not ever. Lena looked at him quietly, searching his face. She saw something she had not seen before, not arrogance, not cruelty, but shame, heavy and honest. She nodded softly. "I forgive you," she said. Brian swallowed hard. Guilt washing over him. "I didn't know. I didn't understand." Lena's voice softened. "Sometimes people hurt others because they carry their own pain." His eyes flickered. And for the first time all night, he stayed quiet. He stepped back into the shadows of the room, humbled. The little girl ran up to Lena, her eyes glowing with excitement. "You did it," she whispered as she threw her tiny arms around Lena's waist. Lena bent down and hugged her tightly, her heart melting. "You helped me," Lena whispered. "You reminded me to follow my heart." Her mother stepped forward and said warmly, "You are special, dear. Don't hide your gift ever again." Lena smiled shyly. "Thank you." More customers came to her, thanking her, praising her, sharing how the music touched them. An older man said, "My wife hasn't smiled like this in years," a young couple said. "Your music made us remember why we fell in love," someone whispered. "Your mother's spirit is alive in you." Every word filled Lena with a warmth she didn't think she would ever feel. It was overwhelming, but beautiful. She realized now that music wasn't just sound, it was connection, it was healing. It was her mother's love still living inside her. Mr. Harris cleared his throat loudly, getting everyone's attention. "I have something to say," he announced, wiping his eyes again. He turned to Lena and took a deep breath. "If you want, the piano is yours to play any time you wish." Gasps echoed through the room. Even Lena stepped back, her hand on her chest. "Mine?" she whispered. He nodded, smiling through tears. "It was your mother's, and now it belongs to you, just like her music." Lena covered her mouth as tears streamed down her cheeks again. She felt her mother's presence like a soft embrace around her. She whispered, "Thank you." "I don't know if I'm good enough." Mr. Harris shook his head, smiling gently. "Your mother once said the same thing." He placed her hand back on the piano. "Just play, child. That's all the world needs from you." The lights above the piano glowed warmly. The keys shimmered softly as if greeting their true owner. Lena sat down on the bench slowly, her heart calm, her hands steady. She took a deep breath as everyone waited. She pressed the first key again. A beautiful, soft note filled the room, then another, and another. A gentle melody spread through the restaurant like sunlight breaking through clouds. People closed their eyes, smiling, crying, holding hands. The little girl swayed happily. Brian sat in silence, humbled and thoughtful. Mr. Harris watched with a heart full of pride, and Lena, she played not for fear, not for pain, not for anyone's approval. She played because music was her home, because her mother's love flowed through every note. And for the first time in years, Lena felt whole again. A girl who ran from music had finally come back to it. The night ended with a room full of hearts healed, a piano brought back to life, and a young woman discovering the strength she carried all along. A night no one in that restaurant would ever forget. A night her mother would have smiled at. A night where Lena finally realized her story, her music, her heart had just begun.